Welcome back, everybody. Ready for another deep dive. Today, we're going to tackle something we all experience, those everyday fears.
Right. Not talking about clinical phobias here.
Exactly. More like those little anxieties that, they kind of make us hesitate or avoid certain
Or
situations.
sometimes they just make us feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, like think about being in a crowded elevator
Ugh, or having to speak in public.
or even just seeing a spider. I know some people really struggle with that one.
For sure, those are all super common.
They are, and we're going to pull from this awesome guide from NHS Inform on managing these everyday fears.
It's full of really practical tips,
So to kick things off, they suggest taking time out when fear strikes.
which might sound overly simple.
Right. But
Uh,
is it really enough to combat like a sudden wave of panic? What do you think?
Well, there's actually a lot of science behind it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so when we get hit with a wave of fear, it's like our amygdala, the brain's alarm system, kind of hijacks our rational thinking.
Oh, wow. So it's like our inner caveman takes over.
Exactly. Like ready to fight or flee.
Even if the danger is just, a stressful email or something.
Exactly. And that's where taking a time out comes in.
So we're giving our brains a chance to catch up and realize we're not actually facing, a saber-toothed tiger.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It allows the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of our brain, to come back online and make better decisions.
And I love how NHS Inform suggests things like watching a funny video as a timeout activity.
Oh, yeah. Detraction is a surprisingly powerful tool,
It is. Who knew cat videos could be therapeutic?
right? It shifts our... Oh, for sure. It can actually make it worse.
So with this technique, we're accepting the feeling while using our breath to regulate our body's response.
Yeah. Deep, slow breaths can actually slow down your heart rate and signal to your body that you're not in immediate danger.
It's like sending a memo to our inner caveman saying, hey, chill out, we're good here.
Love it.
And you know what's really cool? NHS Inform actually has a Steps for Stress playlist.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
It's full of guided breathing exercises, and it's even available in British Sign Language.
Which is fantastic for accessibility.
Totally. Now, this next tip might sound a little counterintuitive at first.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's face your fears.
Wait, really? That's what they suggest?
I know, right? It seems like the last thing you'd want to do when you're afraid.
Yeah, like get closer to what's scaring you.
Right. But it's not about like recklessly confronting your fears.
Okay, that makes more sense.
It's more about gradual exposure.
Oh, I see.
The guide uses the example of someone who's terrified of elevators.
Oh, yeah, that's a tough one.
Instead of avoiding them completely, they suggest starting small.
Like what? Just standing near an elevator.
Exactly. Then maybe pressing the button.
And eventually working your way up to riding one floor.
You got it. Baby steps.
So you're basically desensitizing yourself to the fear.
Right. Showing your brain that it's not as dangerous as you think.
I like that. What about you? Any fears you're thinking of tackling gradually?
That's a good question. Maybe I'll finally try that new recipe I've been putting off.
There you go. See? Already taking a step.
Okay, so another important point from the guide is this. Anxiety isn't harmful.
Which can be tough to believe when you're in the midst of it.
Oh, totally. Especially when your heart's racing and you feel like you can't breathe.
It's easy to think you're having a heart attack.
It really is, but those physical sensations, while intense, are actually just part of our body's natural alarm system,
Right, that fight or flight response.
which sometimes gets a little overzealous.
For sure. It's
Mm.
like our body's alarm system is going off for a minor inconvenience instead of a real emergency.
Exactly. But as the guide emphasizes, if these feelings become really overwhelming or start interfering with your daily life, it's crucial to seek professional help.
Couldn't agree more. Mental health is just as important as physical health.
It is. And there's no shame in reaching out for support.
None at all. Okay, so what's next on our fear-busting agenda?
Let's talk about those pesky, unhelpful thoughts that tend to fuel our fears.
Yeah, those can be sneaky.
They really can. The guide uses the example of being trapped in an elevator.
Oh man, that one gets me every time.
Me too. It's like those what-if scenarios just spiral out of control.
And anxious thoughts have this way of distorting reality, don't they?
They do. They make us overestimate the likelihood of something bad happening.
Or exaggerate the potential consequences.
For sure. So instead of thinking, I'm going to be stuck here forever, we can try to reframe those thoughts.
Like asking ourselves, how likely is it that this elevator will actually malfunction?
Right. We're basically fact-checking our fears, calling their bluff.
Love it. So it's about replacing those catastrophic predictions with more realistic and balanced thoughts.
Exactly. And the guide even suggests writing down our common anxious thoughts
Oh, that's a good idea.
and then coming up with rational counterpoints for each one.
So we're prepared when those thoughts pop up.
Okay, brace yourselves, perfectionists. This next tip is for you.
Oh, I have a feeling I know where this is going.
The guide says, don't try to be perfect.
Ouch, but also so true.
Right. Perfectionism is a breeding ground for anxiety.
When we set those impossibly high standards for ourselves,
We're setting ourselves up for disappointment.
and a whole lot of fear of failure.
And let's be real, no one is perfect.
Nope. And the guide makes a great point that life is messy,
It's unpredictable.
and trying to control everything just creates more anxiety,
So it's about finding that balance between striving for excellence.
and accepting that good enough is often good enough.
It really is. And I think that's where self-compassion comes in.
Absolutely. We need to be kinder to ourselves.
Yeah. Treat ourselves with the same understanding we'd offer a friend.
Couldn't agree more. So listeners, what's one area where you might be holding yourself to impossible standards? Could you loosen your grip a little?
It's a good question to ponder. Now let's talk about a classic relaxation technique.
One of my favorites.
Visualizing a happy place.
Ah, yes, the mental vacation.
I have to admit, I used to be skeptical about this one.
Really? Why is that?
I thought it was a bit too woo-woo, you know?
I get that, but there's actually some science behind it.
Oh, there is.
Yeah, when we vividly imagine positive images and sensations,
It's like a peaceful beach or a cozy cabin in the woods.
exactly, we're engaging different parts of our brain and shifting our focus away from fear.
So it's like giving our brains a break from all the stress.
Precisely. What's your happy place?
Let's see. I'd have to say a hammock swinging between palm trees on a deserted island.
Sounds idyllic. Mine would be a quiet library with the smell of old books and the soft sound of pages turning.
Just thinking about it makes me feel more relaxed. Okay, moving on to another important tip.
Let's hear it.
Talking it out. NHS Inform emphasizes how powerful it can be to share our fears with someone we trust.
Oh, yeah, that could be huge.
It really can, and they even provide contact info for some great helplines.
Like Breathing Space and Samaritans.
Exactly. So for anyone out there who needs someone to talk to, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Because social support is so crucial for managing anxiety.
It is. It reminds us that we're not alone in our struggles.
And sometimes just voicing our fears out loud can make them feel less scary.
It's like letting some air out of that anxiety balloon.
I love that. Plus, sometimes a fresh perspective from someone we trust can really help.
Yeah, they might offer some advice or remind us of our strengths.
Or sometimes just knowing that someone cares and is there to listen is enough.
It can make a world of difference. Okay, so next up we have self-care.
Ah, yes. The foundation of well-being.
NHS Inform highlights the link between overall well-being and managing fear and anxiety.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
When we take care of our physical health, we're also supporting our mental health.
Right. They specifically mention things like healthy eating and regular exercise.
It's like giving our bodies the tools they need to handle stress.
Exactly. And last but not least, we have reward yourself.
Because we deserve it, right?
We do. And it's important to celebrate our progress no matter how small.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Positive reinforcement is powerful. It strengthens those neural pathways associated with courage and resilience.
It's like giving ourselves a pat on the back and saying, hey, good job, you faced your fear.
Exactly. So what will your reward be the next time you navigate a fear-inducing situation?
Ooh, that's a good question. Maybe a relaxing bubble bath or a delicious slice of cake.
Sounds perfect. It's interesting, isn't it, how we tend to see fear as this, like, massive obstacle?
It can feel so overwhelming
It keeps us, playing small.
and stops us from really going after what we want.
Yeah, preventing us from, like, chasing our dreams or trying new things.
Or just embracing all that life has to offer.
Right.
It's almost like we build these walls around ourselves,
To protect ourselves from the fear?
but then we end up trapped inside.
Exactly. And the ironic part is sometimes the things we fear most
Are the very things that could actually bring us the most joy. Isn't that interesting?
It is. It's like a paradox.
It is. We're so afraid of failing or getting hurt
That we miss out on the chance to succeed.
and experience incredible things.
And that's where those tools and strategies we talked about come in.
They can help us chip away at those walls.
So we can finally break free.
Exactly.
So should we do a quick recap of those key takeaways?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so first, we all agreed that fear is a normal human emotion.
It's part of who we are.
And it's actually wired into our brains for survival.
But sometimes, that wiring gets a little messed up.
especially in our modern world,
It's like our fight or flight response is constantly on high alert.
even when there's no real danger.
Right.
Which is where that take time out technique can be so helpful.
Ah, yes, the power of the pause.
Giving ourselves a moment to just breathe.
And let our rational brains catch up. It can really make a difference.
It can, and those deep, slow breaths.
They're more powerful than we realize.
They activate the parasympathetic nervous system.
Which helps to calm everything down.
Exactly.
We also talked about gradual exposure.
Right. Facing our fears a little at a time.
Instead of trying to tackle everything at once.
It's a much gentler approach.
And it helps us build confidence.
Showing ourselves that those fears might not be as scary as we think.
And then there are those unhelpful thoughts.
Oh yeah, those can really get us stuck.
Those what-if scenarios that just spiral out of control.
And it's helpful to challenge those thoughts.
By asking ourselves, what's the evidence for this?
Or what's the worst that could realistically happen?
Right.
But-
Putting things in perspective.
Exactly.
We also talked about self-compassion, right?
Being kind to ourselves.
Treating ourselves with the same understanding we'd offer a friend.
Because, let's face it, perfectionism can be a real struggle.
It sets us up for so much anxiety.
And self-criticism.
So it's important to embrace imperfection.
And celebrate our efforts.
Not just our outcomes.
I love that. And of course, we can't forget about visualization.
Tapping into the power of our imagination.
It's amazing how our minds can create positive change.
By simply imagining a desired outcome.
We're essentially prepping our brains for success.
And reducing anxiety in the process.
It's pretty incredible.
And we can't forget about social support.
Reaching out to others.
Reminding ourselves that we don't have to go through this alone.
That's so important.
It is, because connecting with others
And sharing our fears.
can be so empowering.
It creates a sense of community.
And that sense of belonging can really help.
Especially when we're struggling with fear and anxiety.
And finally, we talked about self-care.
Prioritizing our well-being.
Taking care of our physical, emotional, and mental health.
It's not selfish.
It's essential.
It's about giving ourselves permission to rest.
And recharge.
And engage in activities that nourish us.
So as we move towards the end of our deep dive, I want to encourage everyone listening.
To pick one or two of these strategies.
And start putting them into practice.
You don't have to do everything at once.
Just start small.
Be consistent.
And celebrate your progress along the way.
And most importantly, be kind to yourself.
Because fear is a part of life.
But it doesn't have to control us.
We have the power to manage it.
And live fulfilling lives.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into everyday fears, it keeps coming back to me how much fear can really hold us back.
It's true, isn't it?
Wow.
It can be so limiting.
Yeah, it keeps us from, really going after those dreams, trying new things.
Like we're stuck in this little box.
A self-made box.
Exactly. And what's so interesting? The things we fear the most
are sometimes the very things that could actually bring us the most joy.
Isn't that wild? It's like this weird paradox.
It is. It's like we're so scared of, failing or getting hurt.
That we miss out on all the good stuff.
And that's where all these tools and strategies we've talked about can really come in handy.
Right. They help us break out of that box.
By brick.
Exactly. So, how about a final recap of those key takeaways, just to really solidify everything?
Sounds good to me. Let's do it. So we started by acknowledging that fear is totally normal.
It's part of being human.
And it's actually wired into our brains for survival.
Right, but sometimes that wiring gets a little crossed.
Especially in our modern world where we're not, constantly facing life or death situations.
For sure, our fight or flight response can get a little overactive.
It's like it's stuck on high alert.
And that's where taking a time out can be so helpful.
Giving our brains a chance to chill out.
And those deep breaths we talked about.
They really can make a difference.
They can, because they activate that parasympathetic nervous system.
Which is like hitting the brakes on the stress response.
Exactly. And we can't forget about gradual exposure.
Facing our fears little by little.
It's much less intimidating that way.
And it helps us build that confidence.
Proving to ourselves that, maybe those fears aren't as scary as we think.
And then there's the whole thing about those unhelpful thoughts.
Oh yeah, those can really spiral out of control.
Those what-if scenarios.
And it's so helpful to challenge those thoughts.
To question them.
Ask ourselves, what's the evidence for this? Or is this really likely to happen?
Right. It's about getting some perspective.
Exactly. And then there's self-compassion.
Treating ourselves with kindness.
Because we all deserve that.
We do. And perfectionism can be a real trap.
It sets us up for so much disappointment.
So it's important to embrace our imperfections,
And celebrate our efforts.
not just the outcomes.
I love that. And of course, there's visualization.
The power of the mind.
It's pretty amazing how our minds can create real change.
Just by imagining a desired outcome.
It's like giving ourselves a mental rehearsal.
And it can actually reduce anxiety.
It's pretty powerful stuff.
Mm.
And then, of course, there's the importance of reaching out for support.
Knowing we don't have to go through this alone.
Talking to a friend, a family member, a therapist.
Anyone we trust.
It can make a world of difference.
And finally, we have self-care.
Taking care of our minds and bodies.
It's not selfish, it's essential.
It is. It's about giving ourselves permission to rest and recharge.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to encourage everyone listening to pick one or two of these strategies.
And start putting them into practice in your own life.
You don't have to do everything at once.
Just start small.
Be consistent.
And most importantly, be kind to yourself.
Because fear is a part of life, but it doesn't have to control us.
And we have the power to manage it.
And to live fulfilling lives full of joy and meaning.
Absolutely. It's been such a pleasure exploring this topic with you.
And with all of you listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into everyday fears.
We hope you learned some valuable tools.
And feel inspired to, step out of your comfort zone a little.
And embrace all the amazing possibilities that are out there.
Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.